Great, thanks. Welcome everyone to the Southside Community Council Development Activities Meeting. We will have, we'll go to the next slide. The Southside Community Council is a registered community organization through the city of Pittsburgh. Through that registration, we hold the development activities meeting for various projects based off of various requirements. If you want to learn more about those, you can go to the City of Pittsburgh's development activities page or contact someone here at the Southside Community Council. Phil is going to go over how to participate in this virtual dam. And then we have two projects to review tonight, 1403 and 1405 Sarah Street Development, and historic and 1320 East Carson Street for historic review facade renovations.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening. I'm Philip Wu. I'm with the City of Pittsburgh Department of City Planning. And I'll be helping to moderate the chat and monitor for questions. As Jackie mentioned, I'll be going over a few pointers here on this slide relating to participating in the meeting. If anyone has any technical issues, please use the chat to ping me. I saw that there are a few questions already about meeting operations. So if you have any more questions, I'll answer those. For any questions to our presenters, you can use either the Q&A tool to type out your question or comments, or the chat feature, or if you'd like to ask your question out loud or make a comment out loud, you can tap the raise hand button, and that'll allow you to speak after we call on you. For those calling in by phone, press *9. That'll allow you to raise your hands using your phone, and I'll unmute you when we're ready. For our presenters tonight, we ask that you be mindful of anyone who might not be in front of their computers or who might just be on their phone, and to try to best describe what's on each of your slides. And we are recording this meeting for the Southside Community Council to post online to share with anyone who wasn't able to attend. And I think with that, we can get started. We have the Sarah Street Apartments projects going first. If one of you would like to, on the project team, would like to share your screen.
Great. I'm going to lead us off. This is Attorney Drew Miller. I'm representing the property owner Tiffany Abrams on the property of what is commonly known as 1403 and 1405 Sarah Street. As an aside, and by sheer coincidence, I am also a resident of the South Side, broadcasting to you tonight from the 17th block of Fox Way. And you might see that I have one of Baron Batch's paintings behind me. So as a resident of the South Side, and as someone who's representing this particular client, I'm really excited for this project to move into the neighborhood. I mean, if any of us have been watching the news recently, and if any of us who live here know, every weekend there has been some sort of violence that has occurred practically every weekend in the South Side. My concern is that this is going to drive property values down. And I'm sure that's probably a concern for many of you too. With this project that's going in on 1403 and 1405 Sarah Street, we are going to expect to see an increase in property values within the neighborhood, I would expect. In addition, what's happening is what's currently there is a building that's essentially abandoned and blighted. Well, what my client wants to do with her architects who are on the with us, joining us tonight as a panelist, is to tear down these structures, build 2 buildings on each one of these parcels. Each building, in my correspondence to you, I think I described them as apartments, but actually it's come to my attention they're going to be condominiums. So each building will be able to house 2 families, so in total 4 families. What we're going to be asking for from the city is a variance, because these buildings are actually going to go up to nearly the edge of the property lines. Right, also asking for a curb cut. And these particular buildings, as you will see in a few minutes, also have a rooftop deck, but they are only of a height of 30 feet. So we're not going to exceed any type of height requirements as outlined by the building codes. There will be parking spaces in the front of these buildings, which is why we're requesting the curb cuts. And so with that, I'm going to say that I'm just really excited to see this project coming to our neighborhood. It is very similar to actually a house that is right next door to these parcels. So it's going to blend into the neighborhood. It's not going to be something that's going to be drastically different from any of the properties around them. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Art Lubetz, the architect for this project.
Hello, I am the architect, and we did the house, the building next door that has 3 apartments. And actually that client recommended us to the client that's doing these 2 buildings. And next.
You're not sharing your screen. We can't see what you're presenting. So if you would like to present, please go to the bottom of the screen. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. You may want to go into presentation mode so we can see the pages a little bit bigger. Yeah, great. Thank you.
This is a perspective looking at the proposed project from Sarah Street. And the parking is underneath, just like the building next door to this. They have 3 or 4 cars in a row. We have 2 in each building. And they're 2 separate buildings with a 6-foot wide walk and garden in between them. And you can see the 2 floors within the building. The first floor is the cars. The second floor is the second floor apartment, and that's the living room of that apartment. And then you can see the roof deck above with the vines hanging over the edge. Next. There was some question about the curb. The curb there is 4 inches. And there was some questions about the sidewalk. And that is the sidewalk. And the white brick building that's you see in the middle of the screen is coming down if it hasn't been started already. And that will be the second building. And there's another view of the bad condition of the sidewalk. And up in the right-hand corner, you can see a small plan. We'll show it to you larger in a minute. And in the background is the other building that I did about 4 years ago. And this is a view of the rear of our property. This is a view closer up of the rear of our property. And this too. This is a view to the right of our property. The gray building, this building is the one that we did. And then there's another new one. There's an empty lot, and then there's another new one next to that. This is a view across Sarah Street from us. This is the plan of our proposed buildings. The 2 cars under each building. Each of them has a niche carved out of the building so that we can put windows in there, and they will not, we won't be forced to close them up if somebody builds next to us. This is a plan of one side. This is the 03 side, and both of the buildings are mirror images of each other almost. So they all have 2 bedrooms and all the necessary other 2 bathrooms and bedrooms, living room, dining, kitchen. It's all there. And this is a view of the west side of our building with the stair tower, and on top of the stair is a mechanical penthouse that houses the condensers and some fans and whatever, so that we're trying to abate the noise from anything. And to the right of that is the railing of the roof terrace. Next. This is a view of the front with the large glass living room window, the 2 cars under each, and the door and window from the stair tower. And they liked this view of this so much they showed it again. And this is a perspective view of what it will all look like. And the condensers are on top, hidden behind the walls, as are the fans and whatever. And the walls around it will be insulated to keep the sound from going out too far. Next.
That's it.
That's it.
Mhm.
So the goal here is to be as contextual as we can, in the sense that we really only have 2 floors of construction above the ground and 1 in the ground. And the tower, the mechanical tower and stair up to the terrace is the rust colored part of the building in the almost the middle of it. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has, or any comments.
Sure. Thank you for that presentation, and going through the details there. I'd just like to, for the community attendees that are on the phone, could you explain in detail the variances that you are going after on this project, and explain in detail what variances they are and what is allowed?
Sure. This is Attorney Drew Miller again. The variances that we're seeking, as the building, or sorry, the zoning code would have it, is the setback variances, and I believe that they are 15 feet, if I'm correct. I don't know the exact number, but what we're asking for is to go almost essentially up to the property line. What's important to keep in mind is that this would not be something that would be peculiar or outside of what you would see in this particular block of the neighborhood. In fact, I think that the previous homes that were on this particular lot actually went to the property line. Likewise, in addition to, if you look at the home to the right that Art showed us during his presentation, that home also goes to its property line. So this isn't something that would be out of the ordinary. That's one of the variances that we're requesting.
I understand that it's not out of the ordinary, but
Sure.
you didn't really answer my question. And
Sure,
I guess
yeah.
maybe the architects can answer that question, that
I
are
can.
responsible for the drawings.
This building is like the building that we did 4 years ago, which will be next door to this building. That building is right on the property line along Sarah Street, right on the property line in the front, and a few feet off of the property line in the rear. And they park 3 cars underneath the building, like we're planning to have 2 cars underneath each of our buildings. And there's no
I
height
understand that, but I'm
variance.
asking about the buildings you're proposing to build, not the one.
No,
you
no,
built a few years ago.
that's how I'm answering though.
Okay,
This building will be 2 stories high with a basement and a mechanical tower. And even to the top of the mechanical tower, it will only be 30 feet, which is allowable. And we're building to the back property line. And as you can see, when I showed the back, the buildings in the back are on their property line. So this building is, I think, just forgetting what the building looks like, it's rather contextual with what exists in and around it. In terms of its setbacks.
Can I just ask for clarification from either Drew or Arthur? Are you saying that the only variances that you're seeking are setback variances, and that everything else you're saying would be of right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Our building is only 2 stories, 3 stories is allowed. Our building will have 2 parking places, and they'll be under the building just like the building next door, so that's contextual. The building will be on the front property line, which is in line with the building next door. And the variance we need to be able to build the building on our side property lines almost up to the property line, which is like several other buildings. And the buildings in the rear of us are on the property line. They actually use a concrete slab that there's a walk or a patio or something. I don't know what we have one picture with somebody sitting in there that is on this project's property. So they're very close to the property lines too. And the south side is a dense neighborhood with lots of buildings being row houses, and they're built to the property lines.
And I also need to mention too that the other variance I forgot to mention was this is zoned single family, and what we're asking is for it to be zoned 2 family, because there will be 2 families living in each one of these units. And then of course, we're also going to ask for the curb cut too.
The fact is though, that the buildings that the one that's torn down and the one that's still up were not single family. They were they had rooms, and I don't know how many people lived in the one. I mean, it was all over the place.
Well, I think the one that was torn down, there was one man living in there. And he had lived there since, for others in the neighborhood can share the length of time that he lived in there. I can't speak for the one that is partially demolished, but the other, it was Dan Sirocco lived there by himself. He may have had people coming in and out, but he lived there by himself.
But the zoning allows more than that.
So I think we're going to have a discussion. I'm sorry, I'll introduce myself. I'm Matt Barungo. I'm an attorney. I advise the community council on some zoning issues. And I do think that the variances you're discussing are not necessarily everything encompassed in this project. I think we're gonna have to have a discussion on it. I'll just point out for starters, I don't think your parking spaces are deep enough to develop the drawings that you have. I think you need a variance as to the depth of parking at 17 feet at 90 degrees.
No, the parking spaces are 18 feet.
And I think 19 is required under the code.
Yeah, 19 is required.
So at a minimum, things like that, if you want to develop as you're presenting, would need to be discussed. I also think rather than discussing what the neighborhood looks like, I think we need to have the realization that the way zoning interprets contextuality is based on the feet off property line from the adjacent property. And it looks like 3 feet to the building you did 4 years ago is the side setback there. I can see an air conditioning unit in it. So I think you're going to be looking at 3 feet there. And on the far side, the building that faces out towards 14th Street, there appears to be a 3-foot breezeway in the rear of that property. I think contextuality would suggest 3 feet off of that property line there. I also think that these decks as drawn are accessory to the building and they would be subject to separate setbacks, and you'd need different variances. You'd need accessory variances to have them out into the setbacks. And we've pretty routinely said we don't want arms hanging over the streets on these properties. So I think there's a conversation to be had that the accessory setback is different than the structure setback. And what does this actually show us and how would this be utilized?
Both of our terraces, the 3 sides of our terrace have a 2.5 or 3 foot wide planting area, so no one can get near the edges.
Okay, and that would be important to know. I don't see it on the drawing, but for certain that deck space would be subject to the front setback and you know, at least there. The other thing I just want to be clear, your attorney said that this is going to be condominiums. Are you doing this under the condominium rules? Is there a declarant and these will be sold as individual with a condominium, like a condo board and condominium rules, or are these going to be owned in fee by a single owner? I'm just not certain what the plan is long term. How are these going to be owned and developed?
I can't.
And Matt, quite frankly, you know, I actually just found out that these are going to be condominium. I was under the assumption these would be apartments until just yesterday. So we really have not sat down, had the time to sit down to really discuss that as to, you know, what the overall plan would be.
This is Tiffany. The property owner. It was our goal to have them all be we're going to own them, but we would like them to be separately parceled so that in the event we want to sell them at some point, we could sell them separately.
So will they be rental properties at this point?
Yes.
Looks like Jackie has a question.
I don't have a question right
Oh,
now.
I do. I'm sorry.
That's
the
Mike
other
McKay.
Okay.
Under his alias.
I guess I'm a little confused at this drawing here. You keep saying it's only 2 floors, but when we look at this part on the left-hand side there where it's called ground floor, where exactly is that? It shows a bedroom in there, but where exactly is that? Is that the basement or is that where you?
In the basement.
That's the basement. Okay, so then, all right, then next we go to the first floor, which, okay, I would have called the ground floor, but that's where you park your cars. And then how do you enter the house from that side door? Okay, then you go up to the 2nd floor. Okay, so that's how you get away with saying 2 floors.
No, there's
Because-
nothing to get away with.
Okay, well, I'm
Basement is
sorry.
not
I'm sorry.
counted
I
as a
didn't mean it
story.
that way. I didn't mean it that way. I was just confused as I didn't realize it was a basement with a bedroom in it. And then 1st floor, 2nd floor, and then of course the terrace. Okay, all right, I understand now.
We do not need a variance for that.
Okay,
Can one of you tell me, like, I'm now, if these are planned to be condominiums and on separate parcels, so they can be sold by the declarant individually, how does that impact? Are you still looking for R2 designation? Like, well, or R2 use? I mean, so this is residential single family attached as the base zoning district. You're asking to do a non-conforming to non-conforming on the one, saying two family old, demolish a 2-family and put a new 2-family in, and then conforming to non-conforming on the other, demolish a single family and move to 2-family on the other parcel. But if it's a condominium, how does that impact that? Is this now, are you going to do lot consolidation and propose a multifamily condominium? Like, what's happening?
There will be, it's 2 duplexes. And there'll be 2 apartments on each side, so that whether they're sold or rented, it'll be the same apartment, the same height, the same width, the same everything. And they'll be rented for a while. I don't know what Tiffany has in mind for the future, but for the present, they're rented.
But I'm asking, like, there's just so many questions. Does she want to be able to sell 4 separate units?
Yes,
Eventually, sorry.
Yeah.
The goal at the start of this was that there would be 4 condo units at the end of the day, which I plan to and intend to keep, but would like to preserve the option at some point, should I like to sell 1 of them or 2 of them, to have the option to do that. But it is my intention to just hold them.
All right, there's a lot of questions, and I don't know how that impacts your request to change use. I need someone from city planning. I mean, Philip, do you have any guidance here?
I've done many condominiums that have turned to rent, and I've done a condominium, a building that was rented and turned into a condominium. And it's just a legal thing. And as far as the zoning concerned, they don't care if it's rented or owned.
That is correct. It's the use is not based on, rental or ownership. It's based on number of units.
Right, so this is Attorney Drew Miller. So essentially, really what we need is essentially like the condominium documents if it were going to be a condominium. So we have essentially Miss Abrams being the declarant, and then just having her present the condo documents, whoever it was, if there is somebody in the future that would purchase these particular condo units, if they in fact become condo units.
And I'm sorry, you said the buildings are mirror images. Will the gardens be internal? So between, like, will the gardens? So they'll be in between, and that's why you have 6 feet down the center, is because that's your egress from the basement dwelling unit?
No, the egress from the basement will be through the main door.
Well, no, but in your second fire exit, you're relying on.
We don't need a second fire exit because there are only 2 units. And there is the reason for the notches is also that would be a potential escape if there was some disaster.
We have quite a few comments in the chat, and might be helpful if I read some of them. From Bianca, says, let's see here. what does almost to the property line mean? What is the actual setback that you're proposing to build to? And Bianca wants to speak. Yeah, Bianca, you're unmuted now. Yep.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hey, great. Yeah, so we live at 106. So actually we're on this image right that you're seeing where it says B Mendoza. That's our house. So I just have like a few questions that we about the set. So the number one question. So I mean, overall, can we start by saying that like we are very happy that there's like a elegant design that's coming into place, and for it to be, you know, owned rather than apartments is also positive, I think. Like we have several questions. So one being like that variance, so that like you keep saying it's going to be almost to the property line. You know, when our house was impacted by the fire, so that's why that new house is on the corner, right? Because that was burnt down by the fire. And we're saying where it was like it's built to the property line, but it was technically, I think, built to the old foundation, and so it like didn't need new variances. And then our house, when we had to rebuild from the fire damage, we were forced to build to the setback rules. And so, you know, I think when we have kids and we have like our little, you know, our little tiny yard there, I think, and we would just be worried that there'd be damage to the work that we've done if it's built like to our fence.
Well, yeah, it'd be
so-
like a canyon too.
Yeah, and also, so
With 110 being so tall, then that one, we would have no light in our backyard. And
yeah, I think we just, you know, we're worried about it being like sucked in. Right, is that what you're saying? That's my husband, Ed.
hello.
And then the other, so one, like exactly what to what setback are you, you know, wanting to build? To that green roof, is there is there access to that green roof? So, and I know you're saying that there's a deck in the front, but is that roof also like walk outable?
No, you can't walk on a green roof. You'll kill the grass.
No.
There'll be no access to that.
No access to that.
Good.
Okay.
It's just being green. It'll be green just for environmental reasons.
Yeah, that's great. But
Okay, great. Yeah. Are there windows on the sides of the buildings?
The windows are in the two notches.
Okay, so those are the only windows.
Yes.
That's the only question?
this stuff.
Possible to build with the 3-foot variance?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think that's what we were asking at first. Like it
Right.
would be, design looks great, but can you just keep the keep the law, like keep the rule, the
The
3-foot
3-foot,
rule? Because so that way it would allow light to maintain like to our property and also not like damage.
Where is your property? Can you point it
Yeah, right there.
right there?
Mhm.
Where's the second new building?
They're in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Will be 2 stories high. How high is your building?
It's 3, but the concern isn't the height of the building. I guess the concern is like the 20-foot that the back green roof area is not bad. But it being right on our property line, then it's gonna put a giant wall right behind our property. We're gonna have a 20-foot wall right behind our fence, you know? And like Dan's house was set back 3 feet before his porch or whatever he had there. And, you know, like we said, we have 2 kids and they play back there and we have plants. I just feel like it would make it very closed in space. That's our concern.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah,
Look, I mean,
that's all.
I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
it's nice to have higher end
Yeah,
design, you know, in our neighborhood. I think
right,
that's
any
great.
kind of improvement feels good. I just,
I mean,
Our lots are 22 feet wide and 21.5 feet wide. And we're gonna bring our buildings within a foot or a foot and a half of the property line. Because even at that, when you take the walls out, and the walls have to be thick in order to be environmentally positive. In a narrow lot like that, we have to be, we can't make this work if we don't have like foot or foot and a half off of the property line.
A foot and a half is better to me than
Then
zero.
on, yeah, I
Right.
think that's what we were asking, like, what is?
No,
the-
no, they're not, no, they're not on the property line. They'll be at least a foot off the property line because the foundations will go out, and then the foundation, is T, it goes out like this, and then the bottom of the footing goes like this. So we need another foot there, at least, so.
Yeah,
They'll be close to the property line, but not directly on it.
yeah,
Well,
I
I
think,
think your drawing's confusing then, right? Because you show your site boundary line and then you show proposed
Yeah.
building and those align with each other.
No, I know that. And
So what is it? So I think that's the question then. We need to have that clarified because it's confusing for folks.
okay, it'll be a foot off the property line.
it'll be great if it was 3. I think that's the rule, but. That's it. I have nothing, I mean, I don't think we have anything else to say. I think it's positive to have the parking underneath also, because that's another issue, is with parking. So I think that a curb cut in our view is also positive. Because it eliminates, cars from the street. But that's all. I don't have any other comments. I don't know how to mute myself, so.
We also have a couple comments from the Dinguses. Daniel Dingus looks like he had to leave, but he said, please record that I post these variances submitted. And then Samantha Dingus writes, the Dingus are also concerned with building to the property line.
Where is their house? Oh, okay,
It looks like it's at the top right.
okay.
It says D Dingus.
Well, their property is very close to the property line. The corner of our purple plan is within a foot or a foot and a half of their house. I mean, they don't have any open space.
Now Bianca is saying that they have an alleyway.
No, but you see this dotted line at the top here?
Mm-hmm.
That is where that alleyway is. It's on this property. And the heavy dotted dashed line above it is our property. So that quote unquote alleyway, and really it's only a slab of concrete, is on this property.
You're saying it's on the 1403, 1405 properties.
Yes, it is. 1403, you can see it there.
Mhm.
1405, you can see it there. I
Now,
guess you
beyond-
can't see it if I'm pointing at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Bianca, who lives there, is disagreeing. She said it runs parallel to 106. So there may
Which
be,
is 106.
The people who were just.
I'm not sure.
I think.
I think, is Bianca's property 106? Yes.
Yes.
Where is that on our drawing?
Right there. No, the people who
The
were.
B
just-
Mendoza.
Oh,
The,
okay. Well, their building goes to their side yard is 0 on both sides. I think the fronts are all 0. So they do have a small space. behind their building. But
Hi, Art. Peter Kreuzmeyer. Do you have you're sharing your screen, right? We're looking at your presentation.
I'm sorry?
You're sharing your screen now, right? Yeah, it's your screen. Do you have a survey that you can
Yes.
put on the screen?
The survey shows the dashed line that we show on our drawing. It was done by Liatis Engineering.
Okay, I'm just asking if there's another drawing that might help explain property lines versus existing footprints and, some of these questions that are coming up about.
Well, we show all the adjacent property to us. And there's nothing to the left of us. And this is the Notkins building that we did. And it has 3 or 3.5 feet between the back and the fence. And this is an empty lot. And this is, these people spoke just a minute ago. And the property lines of I don't know where the property is, but the buildings behind us are very, very close to our property line.
Well, right, and that's what I'm getting at. I think it might be easier to understand where the lines are, where the footprints are, if they're on the same sheet of paper. So maybe that would help understand this setback question. I mean, I understand
But the drawing that we did is from the survey.
I understand. I'm just asking if you have.
No, we have their survey and we can send you a copy of it.
Actually, Peter, I have the original survey. If you want me to share my screen, I can show it. I don't know what year this is from, but it shows the original properties. If you want to see that.
I'm just trying to understand property lines versus footprints relative to these setback questions, just to see all of that on one sheet of paper.
Sure. And actually, I think what's nice, and Art, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you see the small dash lines on this particular drawing here, that was the building that used to exist on that particular property that no longer exists. So you could sort of see the impact that this particular drawing would have, or this particular building would have, in relation to what was there originally. So those small dash lines you see was the building that I believe burned down the fire. On each lot you can see, and then what's over top of that is what's proposed.
That's correct.
All right, well, as far as the setback variances go, the front yard setback, if the argument is for contextual, it would be helpful to illustrate that context a little bit better. I mean, we've done that kind of ourselves, going to Google Earth and driving down the street. But that would help make that argument. As for the side yard setbacks, I mean, it sounds like there's some question about that. But let me move on. I think the bigger question on this project is the use variance. I mean, zoning is essentially density control, and asking for a change from single family to multifamily essentially for this one parcel is requesting an increase in density. So maybe this is a question for Drew or Tiffany. What is the hardship that requires this density increase above what's allowed by right in the zoning?
Well, Peter, essentially what's happening is I believe 1403 apparently had already gotten some sort of variance at some point in time, because that was zoned. If you go to the Allegheny County assessment page, it's listed as 2-family. So what we're talking about here, essentially,
I'm not asking about that one. I'm asking about the other one.
And that's what I'm getting at is that in terms of what we're talking about is we're going to take it from single family to 2-family. We're just asking to increase essentially between these two properties by 1 family. That's the impact that it's going to have.
I understand that,
Sure.
but my question is, what's the hardship? that this variance request is based on.
What do you mean hardship?
Your lawyer should know. If you're
You,
going.
you need to demonstrate a hardship to, successfully ask for a variance, because a variance is basically, something that you're requesting that's not, adherent to the zoning code.
So that's the question. What's your argument for increasing the density? Like, what's the hardship argument for increasing the density on this one parcel? I'm not, trying to be antagonistic. I'm just.
Sure, no, I get that. Well, I think, Peter, when you come down to it, the hardship is going to be that if we don't do this, what essentially you're asking is to build a giant building on this property for one family. I just don't think that feasibly that's going to work in terms of trying to find someone who would have the ability to come in, have the funds to buy that. We think that in terms of especially improving the value of the neighborhood, it would be better by having it be two families. Having two families come in here, that's going to be two different taxpayers you're going to be getting tax money from. I just think that in terms of the ability to just build a single family, would not be feasible.
Well, okay. I'm trying to help you tee it up for the zoning review folks, because they're going to ask that, and that's.
And there are enough single-family homes that are either built or renovated here on the south side.
Well, I do think there is probably a need for some decent housing for like young professionals who maybe can't afford a single family residence just yet.
Well,
That's not an argument.
That's really not an argument, because when you decide to rent or sell, you're going to sell to whoever gives you the price that you're asking for. And you're not going to say, I'm only going to sell this to a young professional so that it can be affordable. We went through this a couple of years ago on another property, and you can't necessarily hold, maybe you can say that we're going to hold this, but the young professional may then turn around and sell it to a parent of a college kid who, so that they can get their money back after the student graduates. And so you really can't say, I'm only I want the young professionals to be able to purchase an affordable home, because it's probably, depending on what your selling price will be, it's probably not going to be affordable to a young professional. So that's not an argument that zoning will consider.
Yeah, and I know that everyone's tagging on, but I do think that there needs to be said that when we see a lot like this come through this group, we much more expect to see parking and curb cuts similar to what is here, but then a 3-story structure above, usually slab on grade, with a 1/3 coverage mezzanine above the 3rd floor, a rear facing deck with mechanicals in the front, inside a mechanical enclosure that hides them from view from above on the slopes, and set back off the street so that they don't impact the sightline, and the sightline stops at 3 stories. And that's what you're allowed to build here by right. That's the envelope that the zoning code creates for you to build into. And to say that it's hardship to put a 3-story with mezzanine single family home that we see developed on some regular basis on lots slightly smaller than this is where I think it's going to be difficult. And I'm not trying to just jump in and add on, but I do think that we've seen enough of these developments that that's what we expect. The last thing I'm just going to ask, and because I don't want to keep interrupting, but with this cutout, especially on the 1403 you won't have 32 inches of egress from that emergency escape in the window. So will there be an easement over the adjacent property? How are you getting emergency access from that basement window bedroom out onto Sarah Street? And you don't have to address it right now, but is that gonna, if there's not an easement, I'm not sure how that's working. So that's just, I'm just putting it out there that I'm not sure what the plan is, and I'll go ahead and mute myself, but.
Two-story buildings, duplexes like these are, don't require a second way out.
I want to read a comment from Zach Tabler, and it looks like he has his hand up as well. If we are worried about prices for a single family to fund a house, why aren't we talking about the inclusion of parking? City planning says a single parking space per unit drives up the cost of an affordable housing development by 12.5% on average. Zach, you should be able to speak now.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Zach. I live at 112 South 15th Street, so I'm right across the way on the corner of Sarah and 15th. I just, based on the conversations that are being had about affordability, I mean, that's a super important thing, I think, to make sure that housing is affordable. And I think the parking structures, there's a multitude of problems that I have with the parking structures, especially with the inclusion of trees on the property where there's really not room. It also, like I mentioned in my comment, the city of Pittsburgh says that this drives up pricing of housing. And if we're concerned about the affordability of the units for new homeowners in the future, that is definitely going to exacerbate the issue. Additionally, if you're including parking, there was a study commissioned by the Transportation Alternatives that found that residents with guaranteed off-street parking were 45% more likely to drive to central business districts as opposed to taking public transportation when it's easily available, which we know that it's right down the street from East Carson. There's a T line just down the way. There's a ton of different options for different ways to get around, and the inclusion of more spaces for cars are just going to increase the amount of cars in general in the space, which I don't think is very useful or something that I find desirable. I have seen additionally the curb cutouts make it harder for pedestrians to walk. I've watched neighbors come down in their motorized scooters or wheelchairs down the street of Sarah Street, just walking on choosing the street over here because of the amount of inability to take the sidewalks today. And the curb cuts are just going to make that harder. Additionally, the curb cuts are going to be wide enough that there's not going to be enough room to plant the trees, which also, I mean, the trees help cut back on the amount of emissions that cars put out. So we're increasing the amount of cars. We're taking away the ability to plant more trees because the tree pits require about 10 feet to plant. So I am concerned about that, as well as the safety of just the area, like that stop sign at Sarah. This is very close to that stop sign. Cars fly by there, and these people having to back out onto that street pose a safety risk for the cars that are pulling off that street in particular.
We are proposing exactly what is next door to us, and there's a picture of it.
But I would think that, again, so that's a 2-car garage, that's it,
Three.
or 3-car. But now what you're doing is, as Zach has mentioned, you're adding additional curb cuts. And so there's more cars that are coming out.
One more.
Which poses, so 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 more cars coming out onto an extremely busy street.
Well, like the entire block basically becomes one big curb cut there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And recently, and Matt can address this better than I. Houses, I believe that new builds now do not actually need a parking space in order to be approved by the city.
Yes, that was 2001 legislation.
Oh,
That
Well, there was legislation recently for single family attached dwellings not requiring parking spaces.
Okay, okay,
But that was only for that specific use.
okay.
Right, I think as I read the building code, I think that it does require parking for these new builds. And so to go to Zach's point, I think that what he's asking would actually require us to get a variance to not have parking
Okay.
spaces.
Well, I would support that.
Yeah, but then again, let me play devil's advocate. If we did that, let's presume that we decided not to get parking spaces for what is essentially 4 units. Those people would now have to have on-street parking. And for anyone who lives in the neighborhood, as I do, that it's impossible to find on-street parking anywhere in the South Side.
I disagree, as
Yeah.
someone who also lives and in the
We all
south side.
find it.
We
all
find it eventually.
Yeah, you'll find it eventually, but I can't, maybe Shady Side's another neighborhood, like in the business district where it's pretty as bad as what the South Side is, but I can't think of any other areas in Pittsburgh that has parking as bad as what it is here in the South Side. So by not having off-street,
I think it's also disingenuous to assume that people that are going to be moving here need to live with a car. You don't need to have a car to live in Pittsburgh. I don't need to have neighbors that have cars. If anything, it destroys the neighborhood integrity. The more places that you walk by, it ruins the neighborly feel. You're cutting out trees, just having parking structures that you walk by really degrades the neighborhood, I find personally. I don't want to live next to a bunch of parking spaces. Well, you know what I mean. Garages, not front doors, not making it feel like a live space.
Right.
Everyone lives on the second floor.
A question is, the house that is partially, I guess, demolished at this point, 1403, prior to being purchased in, I guess it was 2021, was it a habitable home, 2-family home?
1403, when we purchased it, had 2 structures on it. One that was habitable and one that was not.
When you say 2 structure, it had 2 structures on the property line.
Yes.
The property.
Yeah, it was already a duplex. So, but one of
Yes.
them had been allowed to just get so bad that it was not habitable. And when we
Mhm.
purchased it, that back unit was not habitable, but the front unit was. And so that's the unit that still remains, is because we had to wait till our tenants completed their lease to move out. And that's why that last building is still there.
So you actually could keep that and then build on to the back of that. That would have been an option for you. Am I correct?
I don't think so. That building
What?
is in awful condition. Awful.
Well, I mean, like technically, yes, right? Like we could
Okay.
have one unit in the back and one unit in the front.
Mhm.
And then just have the other lot sit empty.
No, you could have built on the other lot.
It wouldn't pencil for us. So we wouldn't do that.
So I think Mike McKay, Mike, is your hand up again?
Yes, I, just a question. I don't know if this means anything, but if it's a 4-bedroom dwelling, I'll call it, and there's only parking for 2 cars, does that mean anything? And I'm only asking because I don't know the answer to that.
It's the kitchen. A unit has to have a kitchen. And these 4 apartments or condos, apartments will each have a kitchen, and they'll each have 2 bathrooms. And so that.
How many bedrooms? How many bedrooms?
2.
2?
2, there's 1 in the basement, there's 1 on the first floor, and there's 2 on the second floor. That's 4.
No, that's not correct.
Okay, go ahead.
The one in the basement is really anything you want to use it for. And then they have a bedroom on the first floor. The second floor has 2 bedrooms on the same floor. And that's the
Okay.
same on both of them.
The second
Okay.
floor is a separate unit, so each building has 2 units.
It's like 2 duplexes.
So Mike, I think you're saying if the person that moves into the first unit has 2 cars and the person that moves into the unit above has 2 cars, we have 4 cars and 2 parking spots.
Yeah,
No, the parking spaces will be assigned to each apartment. And if you have 2 cars, one of them's going on the street, or you're gonna get smart and sell it.
okay. The other thing was on the other property next door there, the one that you were dealing with earlier. You see that curb cut goes the entire length. And I know I find walking on the sidewalks, to me, that makes more sense than this down, up and down kind of curb cut. Because if you're not paying attention, you step down slightly into the driveway and then all of a sudden you're back up again and then you're back down again. But as you did on the other property, it's one continuous cut. And to me, that makes more sense if curb cuts ever become an issue.
I totally agree with you. I happen to be handicapped, and you're absolutely right in your description, in my opinion.
Okay, that's all I had.
Kathleen has her hand up. Kathleen Petrillo.
Yeah, I don't want to be rude or anything, but I just don't like what these look like in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is a very historic neighborhood, and the homes reflect a history of the historic value of our neighborhood. And these are so modern that I don't feel that they fit in with the neighborhood. I would love to see something, that would gather some historical aspects of the neighborhood other than these giant cement boxes. It's just my opinion, but I don't think these buildings fit in the neighborhood because they're so modern, and we're not a modern neighborhood. We're a historic neighborhood.
This is the 21st century, and it seems to me that these new modern buildings are going to be a lot better than the 2 buildings that are coming down, which were dirty and falling apart and rather unpleasant, particularly to smell.
I'm
And
not saying that those buildings needed to stay up. I mean, if they're a hazard and they need to go down, I understand that. But these buildings don't really fit in with the neighborhood. There's not many modern buildings like this in the neighborhood. They're mostly historical designed. Even newer ones have nice brick and they're historically designed. I just don't feel like these fit into the neighborhood. I mean, it's just my opinion, but I mean, according to the chat, other people have the same opinion, that we live in a historical neighborhood and we want to keep it that way.
What do you mean exactly by that? What would you like to see built?
I'd like to see something that matches the rest of the houses around here. I mean,
well, this one matches the house that's right next door to it.
well, and that house doesn't match the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. I mean, like if you go down our streets, we have these beautiful old houses that have great woodwork. A lot of them are brick, and they just have all these nice historical details. Even newer ones, can mimic, and they can have historical details, that are new, but they look like old stuff. These are just boxes. I just don't think that they fit into it.
An example is Zach's across the street. That's I think a nice example. It's not, Victorian necessarily, but it has a nice a look that Kathleen, I think, is referencing.
And let me just address, living here in the South Side too, I see where you're coming from. I mean, part of the appeal of moving to the South Side was the historic South Side neighborhood. And I mean, going down East Carson Street, you get to look at these buildings from the, like mid to late 1800s. You get to see, how things used to be and the history of the entire neighborhood. So I do see where you're coming from. In fact, if you wanted to try to build a house like this on East Carson Street, you would be prevented from doing so. You would not be allowed to do that. I'm also going to push back a little bit in terms of what's being built in terms of the new buildings. If you come down Foxway, my neighbor right next door at 1710 Foxway, their home is a building that looks exactly like this, a structure. It's 3 stories high. It actually has 2 rooftop decks, one in the front and one in the back. And as you drive around the neighborhood, what you're seeing is actually more and more buildings that do look like this. So I see your concern in terms of like, hey, if this used to be, historic looking, and now these newer buildings are moving in. I think if you want to try to protect that, I think what you want to do is go to the city council and expand where the historic district lies. And that would actually prevent anybody else in the future from moving in and trying to build these more modern type of homes. But, in a sense, like if you're permitted to do so, I think people are going to do so. It's just, how things are moving in terms of the future.
We did a house several years ago in the North Side Historic District, which is a modern house, and it was reviewed and accepted and built. And I think the thing that should be considered is, do we all want to look backward or do we want to look forward? And looking forward means building of today for tomorrow, not building of today for yesterday.
Well,
I think our focus.
excuse me, and in any community, not everyone is going to have the same opinion as to what sort of architecture they want, unless it is a designated area, such as Drew was saying, where within that area, there is only one type of building allowed. And then someone who wants that type of housing can go there. But there are always going to be diverse opinions on what architecture should be and what it should look like and function as.
I agree with what you are saying in terms of that there's always going to be disagreements with that. And I can't really speak to different people's taste in architecture and stuff like that. But building, to focus on the point of building for the future, I really think that is a crucial point about building anything new, which is one of the reasons why I care so deeply about the area and the way that we're building around it. By like just going back to the curb cuts, like building for the cars is not building for the future. We need to be cutting back on that as a main focal point of people living in a dense neighborhood. That's not building for the future, that's building for now. If we want to build for the future, we need to be thinking about the ability to create welcoming spaces that are not dominated by cars. We need to be thinking about these important pieces. I moved in 2019. I am only 30 years old. I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I love the South Side. I care very deeply about the future of this space. I think that is a really important part of it. Granted, the style of the house, I do care about it, but I mean, it's not a historic district. You have the ability to build what is desired. But I do think that like, if we want to make that a focal point, that we need to consider making cars a focal point of the street level, because that's just it's not conductive to like a neighborhood feel. We're not thinking about the accessibility. We're not thinking about the emissions. We're not thinking about the future if we're doing that.
So I wanted to, we had one of our DAM members unable to attend. And I would like to share his comments. Now, Jackie said that she'll read them if I want, but so I don't know if they have been met in this discussion or not, but would like to address them since he took the time to look at the plans and look at the variances and then respond. So Jackie, did you want to read those?
I can, yes. Well, I'm pulling them up on another screen here. Regarding the variance request for setbacks, number one, the applicant's drawings do not represent the adjacent structures at 1401 to the west and 110 South 15th Street to the east. We therefore have no way of knowing what the setback conditions are for the two adjacent properties or any of the surrounding properties. And keep in mind, they had the presentation that was sent to us prior to this morning. We just received your final presentation this morning, so I just wanted to mention that. Number two, the city's interpretation of contextual setbacks is to match the condition of the adjacent properties. Number three, it appears that the proposed 5-foot by 3'6" garden for 1403 will abut the existing structure at 1401, and the garden will be a light shaft enclosed on all four sides. 4, it appears that this structure at 110 South 15th Street is built 3 feet from the property line, as the air conditioning units are located in this area. Contextual setbacks would require that 1405 match the 3-foot side yard setback. Number 5, the applicant will need to clarify the hardship for requesting the setback variances. And in a side note, he writes, regarding the parking spaces, I am concerned that the length of the space at 17 feet is not sufficient to prevent larger vehicles from overhanging into the sidewalk and creating an obstruction if vehicles do not pull completely into the parking area. For example, a Ford F-150 is 17.4 inches long, and a Cadillac Escalade is 17.5 inches in length, both of which I have seen regularly parking in the 1800 block of Fox Way. He also sent some marked up documentation that we will take as record as well.
Jackie, who was that from?
Let me interject a couple things. First of
That
all,
was from David Nishke.
may I answer some of that?
Yes.
First of all, there's an error on our drawings. It's not 17 feet, it's 18 feet. Secondly, the fact is that it's easy to walk on the way they've done, we did, the building next door, the sidewalk is almost uninterrupted. It has a tiny slope to it, but very slight. And you can walk from one end to the other. And she said something else that I wanted to answer, and I forget what it was now,
Okay.
unfortunately. And the reason our building looks the way it does is that the fronts of our building face south. And we were trying to get as much light into them as we can. And they will be, which will cut down the heating costs in the winter and raise the air conditioning costs. But these will be very environmentally considered buildings.
Arthur, can I ask for clarification on the parking?
Yes.
You said that there's an error and it's actually 18 feet from building to end of the parking space.
That's
I
correct.
believe that my quick review of Mr. Nitschke's email and the parking standards for the city of Pittsburgh require 19 feet. Are you saying that that's an additional variance that you're requesting, that you want to have an 18-foot deep parking space? Or I'm just confused as to what the final argument is there. Because you're saying it's 18 and we believe it's 19. So how many feet do you need and are you asking for a variance?
I guess we'll ask for a variance.
Thanks.
I'm the wrong person to ask that. My car is 12 feet, 4 inches long. It's a
Mini roadster.
mini roadster.
We do have another question. It says, may I ask if the building owner is local and what the plan is for managing the occupants of this space? If the hardship is shown to make this a multifamily unit and they are rented.
These aren't multi.
This is Tiffany. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is Tiffany again. We are not local, but we have a lot of family in Pittsburgh where they're often. We also own other properties in Pittsburgh, and we have property management services that we would employ.
Thank you.
One of the neighbors, Daniel Dingus, has his hand raised.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I own 104 South 15th Street, which butts up against the back of the house there. I own the White House. There's a number of different variances, and obviously I haven't been on the entire call due to conflicts, but you just raised kind of a good point that you really wanted to face the front and let a lot of light in, but replacing 2 smaller homes with 4 large units with parking and different variances that you're asking for kind of casts a big shadow on the rest of those homes.
Our building is only 20 feet high.
Yes, then you put the air conditioner and the rooftop deck on for additional.
The roof deck is open to the air. It's not a story. It's not
I have to
enclosed
finish.
space.
I have to finish, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's all right. So I think the other part is that you spent a lot of time discussing the other home, and I do acknowledge they're very well done. But what we're not looking for is to jam additional houses in. Unfortunately, those houses were burnt to the ground, and it only stopped at my house because there was a gap in between. We wouldn't have ended up with any of these homes had we had ample space in between each of them. So I have to go on the record that not only do I oppose the parking variances as well as the variances going up across the house, but all of them. You're replacing homes that were much smaller by casting big shadows on the rest of them and creating safety hazards.
I don't agree with that. First of all,
you don't have to. You just have to prove that your variances are okay. I'm going to oppose the variances.
well, thank you.
Sure. And we respect that. And as I'm looking at pictures from Google, the street view, it appears that 1403 Sarah Street was a larger structure. I don't know if it was exactly 30 feet high, but it appeared to be a 3-story structure. The one next to it, though, was only about 1 story. And I think it looked like it was almost like a garage type thing. But I since it was a single family, I can't imagine it was a garage. But it was kind of a little teeny shack, maybe like a storefront potentially, or no, like a little teeny shack.
It was a row house.
Okay.
It was like a row house, yeah.
Yeah, and so the thing is that anyone who lived now, yeah, that was only like a story high. Maybe it was about 12 feet high, and you were going to have more space and more light. But at any point, anyone could have came along, tore that structure down, and then built something that was 30 feet high and looked exactly like the structure next to it, you know? So I see where you're coming from in saying that, well, it's going to change what used to be, but in terms of what could be, you know, I don't think there's going to be any change.
That's not true if you're asking for variances.
Well, so we're asking for variances in terms of the single, we're not asking for a height variance. So someone could have come in and built a home larger, higher.
Is there a variance to move up to the property line?
Yeah, that'll be a variance.
So that is a difference. So sure, okay, the height's not the issue. You're asking for additional variances that are different from what somebody could build. That is the difference of what we're talking about. So you could talk about what could be, but you can't talk about what could be without variances.
Well, if we were to build something else on either one of these lots, the lots, like I said, are 22 feet and 21.6. If we were to have use the necessary side variances for all of them, that would mean, for both of them, that would mean that we had 11 feet to build a building in. Because
you seem to be a wonderful architect. I'd be curious to see what that looks like.
I'm not that good. I can't manufacture space where it doesn't exist.
I agree. You can't buy a property without variances that would accommodate something that can't be.
Arthur, I hate to chime in again. And I understand, like, the height isn't an issue. This is of right. But to try to tell us that you would have to build it at 11 foot wide, you have a 6 foot gap between the two buildings that's necessitated by basement bedrooms and a desire to.
No, that is not the reason for it.
Also to not connect 4 units so that they don't need to be sprinklered. And I understand that no one wants to build a 4 unit party wall because of the need for sprinklering and the cost associated. But there, if the need for a variance is that you need width and that you are creating a party wall between two properties that you own, it might be a different conversation. And I look at the context here and I don't see necessity. I see more convenience than hardship. And I know that there's an economic reality to development and that's a piece of every development. But I don't think you score points with the approach here. That's my only comment, is that there are certainly other ways, because we've seen enough of these to know. I mean, if these are single families set on a center line attached, I mean, we've seen that a lot of times. It's just food for thought.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, as we're talking about all of this, and, you know, as Drew started with, you know, the challenges that we're facing on South Side, and it's wonderful that someone is coming and wants to build. Wouldn't it be nice? These properties were, you know, Dan's property and the other were not expensive properties to buy. And wouldn't it be nice to have a single family home here with a yard? And, you know, we see over on the Mexican War streets, and, you know, a lot of yards, and certainly it's because the properties were demolished, had to be demolished. So then people purchased the house next door, the property next door, and put up a nice yard. And we don't necessarily have that here on South Side, because most of the, you know, our buildings, fortunately, are such that they're not in as bad shape as those may have been on Mexican War streets. But when we think about wanting to, you know, you know, our interest in the community is to have property owners, not an increase in the number of rental property. It would be wonderful to, you know, you may be able to entice a family to purchase this place if they had a nice yard. And, so I know that cost comes into it, but, you might want to give thought to that, since it's my feeling that purchasing these two parcels were really not that expensive.
The fact is that a little single-family house on this property with a nice yard in front, a yard in back, is a very suburban prototype, and it is very uncontextual in terms of the south side, because the south side is so dense.
But, having a nice looking house with a garden, and because, Southside Community Council is having a garden tour on July 10th. We do have gardens here, and, and they're quite varied. So again, when we're talking about contextual for Southside, I would have to disagree with you that we don't necessarily need to keep up with that density.
I don't think we're talking about keeping up with density as much as we're talking about increasing it beyond a variable. I think that's the important part, that whether we want gardens or open space, I think it's debatable, but I think also what we're talking about is saying, hey, this fits into a density issue, but we're going to make it even more dense.
Well, I would just clarify also that what gets built on the lots does not have to be a single family detached house. It can be, single family attached. So you'd have up to, without variances, you could have up to 16, 17 foot wide houses that share a party wall. So that is a possibility without variances.
So you would have two buildings.
Yeah,
townhouses.
they'd be attached.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, you have already a duplex on one side. I don't know that you would have, that change in use may not require a full-blown, and Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, but non-conforming to non-conforming, duplex to duplex, I don't know that would require all that you have here. So if you had a party wall, you very well might get 3 units in there with very little pushback. Because you would have a duplex on the left and a single family on the right. And you also wouldn't have 4 units, so you wouldn't have to sprinkler it. I just, when I really look at necessity, these are the questions I start to think about. Is like, what's really going on here?
The fact is, the building on the corner that we did is 3 units. And it has 4 parking, I think it has at least 3 parking places in exactly the same position as our parking places will be. And that building is on the property line along Sarah Street, and it's on the property line along the street in front of it.
Not sure 2 wrongs make a right here.
No, but I don't think that building is wrong. I designed it, and I think it's rather attractive. It's very modern.
It's very attractive. It's very modern. No one's going to take away the work that you do. I think what we have to understand is you're looking to build something that is not permitted currently. And while I think there's an element of historical piece, there's an element of modern piece, but I think we have to be careful to say you're pushing across boundaries of variances that take away what's nice around it. And to take away from what's permitted and move past that has to be recognized to say, hey, we're going to build right up to the line, and guess what? We have a pretty building, and screw everybody else. That's not fair.
So you would be happier if we were to push these 2 separate buildings together
You only have one building right now.
Pardon me?
You're talking, if you put those two buildings together in your drawing,
Yes.
remove the variances and put it in a perspective that says, I'm adhering to what's available. I'm not sure we have an argument.
Well, I don't understand what the argument is then.
So I'm just
That
want to be
changes the
clear.
economics, and that's what we're also talking about here.
I just want to, this is Tiffany, sorry, because I'm just trying to get a understanding is you guys would prefer that we do like on the 1403 side, we just go to 30 feet and try to put the units there and then make like a separate single family on the other side.
No, what I'm saying is we could push the two of them together. And have a minor variant on the sides.
Yeah, we're talking no variances here. We're not, we have to get to a point where there's no variances and then there's no argument.
What is the reason that the zoning code allows for variances? Why are variances in the code?
Variances to permit reasonable economic development that doesn't infringe on others.
Okay, and so how are we infringing on anybody?
You're
We're
going
building a
over the line.
20-foot high building.
Yeah, and tell me about, you keep going to what's permitted as opposed to what's not permitted. You want to go over the line and you want to add parking and curb cutouts. We have to get to a point where we're addressing the issues, not what you've already defined as permitted.
I haven't defined anything as permitted. I am pointing out the contextual.
You have, that's why we're having the hearing. Skip the
No,
contextual.
We're going to be asking
problem.
for we're going to be asking for.
Here, let me be real clear. You keep talking about designing a house with variances, and I'm going to keep talking about how I don't want you infringing on those variances. So
Okay.
I got to make it, I want that on the record and I want it clear. So keep going round and around about how you want to build up across all those barriers. And I'm going to keep talking about why it shouldn't be permitted.
If we were to look at your house or your building, would it?
1890 it was built.
Existing zoning?
1890 it was built. This is
Yeah.
2022.
I know, that's the point.
The point is you have an opportunity. You don't build with asbestos. Things change. There's a reason why we have zoning. There's a reason why we have these variances.
And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like from what you're saying, it's really like we're talking about essentially 3 feet is what's keeping you from saying yes, right? Is that what I'm kind of getting at?
3 feet across the line.
Right. So if you're saying if you push the buildings together, then there's no issue.
That's not true. Your architect just said that he still needed more space.
Yeah.
He needs to go over that line. That's what we're talking about. And what I told you each just now was come up with a plan that doesn't violate the variances.
Yeah.
And you have yet to be able to conceptualize that because you can't do it. I'm staring at it right now. You can't meet those demands. You're talking about building an 11-foot house where somebody had a 2-story house, a modest 2-story house that didn't infringe on anybody.
Isn't there an advantage, though, to having 4 units with an increased, tax base?
We don't get we hear the people that live across the street or Dan around the corner, he's not getting those tax dollars. He may get them in trash collection or something like that, but I think he's talking about quality of life every day here on the South Side.
Sorry, and this is Tiffany again. I'm I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So the quality of life piece, having nicer new places for people to live, wouldn't that answer some of that?
It does, unless it's impacting on the people who currently live there. And I think that's what Dan is sharing. How
You're telling me it's a great quality of
if the
life.
variances are approved, it impacts his quality of life.
Yeah, you basically told me 3 times about how much light you're letting in and how wonderful it's going to be. And then we start to talk about how you're going to build up to everybody else's line. And we don't talk about how that infringes on anybody else. And then you tell me, hey, well, we're allowed to do this, but we need a little bit of variance. So sure, it does increase the
Excuse me.
quality of life that lives there, but now you're detracting from everybody else around it. There's 6 houses that butt up against it.
Yeah, literally. And yours is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, 25 years.
But the fact is, you're only 1 or 2 feet away from our property line.
Yeah, the entire house goes through that entire lot. About 15 feet or more of my house goes through that lot directly. So I'm here addressing my issues, but I'm also addressing them for others that don't have a voice.
So, but your house doesn't comply with the zoning as it is.
1890, come on, stop with the.
Well, I'm just saying.
Are the
Would you
houses
go-
houses that were built prior to the zoning code don't require,
He knows.
No,
that.
I know
He
that.
knows that.
I know that.
adhere to the zoning code.
He knows that. We all know that.
Also, hold on, Daniel, I think we're getting way offline. I mean, Art, the point is, if his property is 2 feet off of the property line, contextually, you would get over the counter a variance up to that contextual setback. The question is, how do you square your request to go far inside what is contextual on these side lots, and you have a gaping 6-foot hole down the middle of your design? I mean, the arguments, the height, and the design elements, and a lot of what we're talking about, I don't know how important it is, but in order to show hardship or necessity, I don't know why it's necessary for you to infringe within the side setback that's maintained by the adjacent property when you're leaving so much meat on the bone straight down the middle of your project. So I don't know that we're having productive discourse at this point. I think we all know kind of what the rules are. And I think at this point, like, it might just come down to, what are you really requesting? Are you truly requesting a 1-foot variance on parking depth? Are you requesting any accessory variances for the decking? Is this a final design that's going?
The deck does not require a variance.
Okay, well, if we could see.
The only variances we require are curb cut and for the parking and the side yards.
And that's fine. I do think we would like to see a more technical drawing to see exactly where some of these elements lie. But and then it can be discussed by the various groups that are here, and then I'm sure you're going to have a hearing and you'll post it. And
The building on the left, the 1403, contextually, if we're just talking about meeting contextually, that building touches the property line on the west and touches the property line on the back. 1705 is about 2.5 feet off the property line. And
here's my problem is that you know better. I mean, we're not talking about the west and the south. We're talking about the adjacent property line. It doesn't matter where the building.
No, that's what I'm talking about too.
Okay, so you're saying that the building to the west of 1403 is built on the 0-foot line on their rear setback, so that the context there would be you could build to the 0 foot. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and the Mr. Dingus's property is a foot, maybe 2 feet away from our rear property line. And the people that have, I can't read it that because it's too small. They're in the same line as his. And the property that we did the building for is 3 plus a little off the property line. So, and their front and their other street line are on the property lines. And we're
This isn't true. Our property, our building is about 4 feet from the line.
I don't know, we have a survey that says otherwise.
Well, it's probably from 1890.
I don't want to argue with you. There's nothing to argue about.
So this is Jackie. This was, I think, a great conversation. Does anyone else have any other questions that haven't been asked so far? Because what happens next, and these meetings are great for the developers to hear back from the community based on their concerns with the proposed plans. So the community has 30 days to submit feedback before you can present this to zoning. So if anyone has any other questions that haven't been asked, I think that we should ask those now. Within this 30-day review period, we can accept additional questions and statements from the community. And Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've worked with some developers in the past within that 30-day period to revise their drawings, actually show what they want to do, because I think there wasn't a lot of clarity here for some people, especially in terms of the variances and the actual property lines. And to come back and possibly meet with the community within that 30-day period, or come back for the dam meeting in July.
Yeah, and I think, Jackie, when I think back on the number of development activity meetings that we've often had developers, once they have heard from the community, they have made revisions and they have come back and shared those. And this is not, it's an opportunity for developers to hear from community. It's not for developers to tell the community what it is that they are going to do regardless. And I think that the process that the city has put in place is because they wanted community to have a more sophisticated approach to looking at development. And so it would be really important for, I would say, for you all to go back and think about what it is that you've heard today. Again, we will be communicating among ourselves, getting others may be looking at this meeting and providing additional input. And then you either come back and meet with us, or you go to the development, the zoning board, and we share concerns that we have.
I just get some clarification too, just based on what I was hearing tonight. I want to make sure we're walking away, with the best impression of tonight in terms of what we might be able to do to make everybody else happy. And based on everything I heard tonight, it seems like the biggest gripes are coming from the north side property line and then the east side property line. And from what I'm hearing, based on all of the discussion, it sounded like if we could get essentially 2 feet off of the back property line and 3 feet off of the east property line, that would at least make everybody happier, not necessarily happy, but happier, because it would at least be within that of what the previous buildings were located, be like the footprint of the previous buildings. Is that what I'm understanding from people, or?
I think, as Mr. Kruthmeyer pointed out, you'd also have to address your hardship in going from conforming to non-conforming on the eastern parcel. I mean, non-conforming to non-conforming, two-family residential is not a stretch. But single-family conforming to two-family non-conforming, it's a little bit harder to understand what the necessity or hardship is.
Yeah. and if I-
Also,
if I could-
also, if you, if instead of 2 feet in the back, if you had 3 feet, depending on what the contextual setback in the rear is, you might not even need a variance.
As a matter of fact, 1403 touches the back property line and touches the west property line. Or is that the east? That's south, north, west. Yes, the west.
Well, I think the argument for contextual setbacks can be made, with drawings that delineate these things exactly. But back to Matt's point on the change of use variance, when you go to ZBA, that is like, they set the very highest bar for a change of use variance. So you're going to need a really great argument for why that is a hardship that they should resolve through a variance. So that just, get ready for that.
And I would like to hear from Dan. Drew had tried to summarize, I guess, what he thought he was hearing. And I was wondering if Dan could answer that, because I think,
Are you talking to Dan Dingus here?
yes.
Yeah, I think if I would offer how you might be able to move forward, I'm not as concerned about the parking, because quite frankly, that nobody parks on that side of the street. And sure, I'd like to move to the future where there's no cars, but that's not where we are as a society yet. If you get them off the street and they're reasonably off the street, I could be open to a 1 foot variance. I mean, most people don't have a Cadillac Escalade, and maybe they have to reconsider that given recent gas prices. I think building something that conforms to what the current codes are and not butting up against the other properties with any type of variance is really important to maintain what's important for us all to have a good living area. And I think, to me, that's probably what's most important to me.
Well, if I can interject for 1 second, if we look at 1403, the existing building with the building attached to it is on the rear property line and on the west property line. The building that we're proposing on 1405 is about 2.5 feet off the property line, if we count the porch that's building, which it is. And it is, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5. I don't have a scale on it. It's not like a huge lawn in a suburban house. It's about 3 or 4 feet off the property line. And so the 1403, by contextual relationships, we can ask for that without any variances. The variances that we have to ask for are on 1405, which have very small lines between the end of the building and the property line. I mean, can everybody see the drawing that we have up now? The dash line here, that's 1403. It touches the back property line. It touches the west property line. This is 1405. It's some feet off of, I don't have a scale, like I said, but it's not on the property line. And the side property line is about 2.5 feet off the property line. So it's not like we're trying to build some huge building that's gonna cast a shadow over the whole neighborhood. Our building is only 20 feet high. Our mechanical tower is higher than that, but it's less than, it's 30 feet. So it meets the zoning. We don't need a variance for that. So the only variances we need are the rear setback for 1405 and the side setback for 1405.
Or you may need a rear variance or variance for the rear setback on 1403 as well. The contextual setbacks are not related to buildings that were once on the site. They're related to the other buildings on that block.
No, well,
that
the
street.
building in 1403 is still there.
But it's going to be
That's what we
demolished,
pointed
right?
out. Pardon me?
It's going to be demolished though, right?
Yes.
It is, but if we have to have it there until we get the setback removed, we could do that. I mean, we're not asking for anything that's far removed from what's there, and that's why I don't understand. And what all this conversation is about. We're talking about building.
It is about, I think, 2.5 feet. I think that's what the conversation is about. I think that we were trying to clarify, like, I think the thing is 3 feet. You're saying you're going to build to the property line. We're saying, please don't build to the property line. It's 1405. That's the concern. All of us that are on the call are neighbors of 1405. The other neighbors, those are rental units that turn over frequently. They're frankly problem units. So those people are not on the call because those are renters that don't care. Anyways, we're not talking about that, but we are homeowners. We lived here, Dan for 25 years, me for 15 years. And so we're just saying, like, I'm personally saying super excited about new and nice, would love, nice new neighbors, would love increase in property value. We personally have modern tastes. When we had rebuilt our house from the fire, as you said, our house looks new and modern in the back because that is our taste. We have lots of windows in the back, lots of light right now. So I think, yes, what we're saying is just don't build to the property line. And it sounds like you want to build 1 foot away instead of 3 feet away. So yes, I think that's
You're
the
in
property
a gray
line.
house that was just renovated, is that it?
Yeah. Mhm.
And you spoke earlier, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Good
well,
summary, Bianca.
thank you, Bianca, for following up with that. I think that, does anyone else have any questions or comments that we haven't covered in the last 2 hours?
Is that how long it's been?
Yes, so
Really?
for you to say you don't understand what's going on, Art, I'm getting worried, so.
I just have one.
We've been talking, that means we've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes for 3 feet.
Well, a little bit
Well,
more than that.
I'm
So
just trying to
Peter,
make
you
a
have one
joke
more
out of it to
follow-up?
take the edge off of things, that's all.
And and you're meeting with community people that care, and we appreciate the discussion.
Yes.
And we have all the confidence in the world, given how well some of the other building, that you can make this work within the constraints that we outlined.
I just have one final thing to add, Art, on the street trees. Love them, they're great. But I think that, I have to check the regs, but I think they want 30 square feet for the tree pit. So if you can
3
make
by
that
10.
work, yeah. That was it. Thanks.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Art and Drew and Tiffany, for being on here tonight. Let's review one more time the next steps in the process, and Barb, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, let's see what we can agree on, okay? I think that would be good
I
too.
think
It's part of the process, so that's
Yeah.
what we want to talk about as a next steps. So as part of the process and next steps, the community has the right for the next 30 days to provide comment. This meeting has been recorded and will be posted. So a lot of people will probably view this after the fact too, that we're not able to make the call. So we give them an opportunity to review, digest, and comment as well. I think, as we said earlier, we have worked with developers to look at some revised drawings, look at some revised designs, address the concerns that the residents have by revisions that you make to those designs. And then after that 30-day period, we will submit a letter to the Zoning Board of Adjustment with reactions to the process. And that will state everything that we talked about tonight, as well as any future steps that take place in the next 30 days. We have had people that also have taken the 30 days to revise their drawings, meet with us, and then come back to the next DAM meeting. Our next DAM meeting would be the third Thursday of July, which looks like the 21st. So you could also pencil that in as an opportunity if you might need longer to digest and think about the plans here for that development. So I don't know if I covered that and everything that I said. I'm trying to zoom in on my screen because I can't see it.
I also want to add that the neighborhood planner for the south side, Thomas, is on this call as well, and he's he's been taking notes, and he's going to be completing a report that will go to the ZBA, the zoning board, that will document all the comments and questions and responses that for the project tonight.
Thanks, Phil.
Yes,
And so
thank
when
you.
this project does go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, you can provide public comment by joining that virtual zoning meeting and raising your hand function to request to speak. And I think, Tom, did you say that this is a little bit different than it has been in the past to provide public comment at a zoning meeting?
Yes, yeah. So on the website of the ZBA, they kind of posted the update. Basically, they request people email them to get on the live testimony list and then testify live. I think you could still also probably send material to the zoning board at pittsburghpa.gov. But I think to kind of ensure you definitely get confirmed a spot and get heard, email them to get on their live testimony list and actually attend the meeting virtually and raise your hand to speak.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you are not on the schedule for the upcoming zoning meetings, correct? The project team?
No, currently we're not.
Okay.
The application is still being reviewed.
Thank you. Okay. All right. All right.
I just wanted to thank the council, Barbara, Jackie, thank you for having us. I think this is a really important process. I want to thank the community for giving their feedback. Certainly, we want to work to make sure that we're good neighbors to everybody and address everybody's concern. Thomas and Philip, I want to thank you, for your insight. Matt, thank you so much for being on the call too. I mean, you can read the codes all day and still really not completely understand them. So, thanks for filling us in terms of what we have to do still. So it was greatly appreciated.
I would like to second all those thank yous.
Yes.
And myself as well. Thank you, guys. We appreciate your input.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
So thanks for the folks that stuck on for our second project. We have a facade renovation at 1320 East Carson Street. I'm curious to see what our gallery looks like now, but let's go ahead and turn it over to you guys so you can get started. If anyone needs a bathroom break, go ahead and
beer?
come
Is that
back
beer,
and we'll
Bob?
send you in.
Bob, are you drinking a beer?
Absolutely.
That's not fair.
That was hard, man. Peter, hang in there, boy.
Oh my gosh.
We'll give you your 2 hours next.
I don't even remember what we're
I had
presenting.
to refill my coffee cup.
I would switch beverage. I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm
It
still.
was a, but again, it was a good meeting, and I think that it's an example of what the city wanted to happen when they put together the registered community organization. So I think, again, if somebody's wants an example of a good dam, I think that was a good one. So thanks to everyone.
Yeah, if you have an extra 2 hours to watch the video, please.
Yeah, and I think that
Send it to your friends.
Hey, our church is gonna get ready to expand in Oakland, and I'm sitting here going, oh, hell. I can just imagine what the whole community is gonna say about that. Oh, God.
And I think it gives us an opportunity to learn. We're learning about the historic district from Bob and Jody, and we're learning about zoning from Mike, Matt, Peter, and it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
All right. Well,
I'm glad you have positive things to say about the dam program, because a lot of folks around the city, other RCOs, don't share the same opinion.
I know.
I think Quaylen can probably attest to that in Oakland.
We haven't even started yet. This call I called one of the guys and I said, oh, previews from coming attractions. We really better make sure that we have everything in order.
Well, they can share that. You can share this video with them.
Good idea.
All right, Sarah, are you all ready over there to take control?
Yes, we're ready. So this is Sarah Harris. I'm Peter Margatai. We are with Margatai Architects, and we will be presenting 1320 East Carson Street for you tonight. I'm going to share my screen, try to figure this out. Hold on. Oh, it's on here. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to move you out of the way. I'm going to attempt to be very brief. So 1320 is a very, very typical late 19th century structure on East Carson Street. It essentially on the upper floors, second and third story. It's essentially historically pristine. It has all the original details, the masonry. I think they might even be the original windows. However, it's very clear on the lower level, the storefront has been replaced. And I'm not really even sure how to describe it, but it's not original in any way. If we were to zoom in, which I'm going to attempt to do here real quick, hold on, let me move my guy out of the way here. We zoom into the existing photograph a little bit. You'll see that there are still some original elements that we're going to do our best to preserve. They're the original sort of buttress piers on each side, the decorative signboard and cornice, as well as the brackets on each side. And we even believe that the transom bar here is original, kind of where the sign pain pain release clinic, chiropractic, myotherapy, nutrition sign is located. We actually are fairly convinced, although we don't know yet because we haven't had a chance to really do any exploration, but we're fairly certain that the original transom windows are likely still in place behind that sign. We'll find out for sure when we do demolition. So the attempt, as per the historic design guidelines, is we're going to keep everything that's original and restore it. There is no plan, so before anybody asks, there are no plans to do any restoration work on the upper floors. The owner is not interested in doing that at this time. Our proposal, and actually I'm sure everybody's familiar with the context of East Carson Street in that area, but I will, since we have the images available, I'll show that to you. So you can see it's fairly central on the 13th block of the northern side of the street. This is a view looking, looking east. Sal's Pizza is next door. The owner of this property is Sal. He doesn't know exactly what he wants to do on the interior of the property yet, but he does know that the building looks pretty bad and he wants to improve. I would love for him to let me do his building, his pizza shop,
yeah.
but we'll see how this one goes, and maybe he'll be inspired to do the building next door.
So Peter, what you're saying is he owns both those buildings?
He owns both buildings, correct.
Okay.
Here you can see again, here's the pain release building across from the former Schwartz's Market. This is looking west. And that's what we have. So if we focus on the design proposal, let me zoom in. Sorry. Uh-oh. This happens. There we go. Sorry, bear with me.
Sarah will bail you out, Peter.
I know, right? She's like chomping at the bit. She's like, come on, let me help you.
Are those wooden shutters in the second and third floor
I don't think
windows?
there's any shutters. Oh, on the interior.
Yeah, what are they?
You didn't even get,
Those are just blinds.
they're just blinds. They're not shutters. They do kind of look like shutters, though, huh?
Yeah.
Did you go up there?
I mean, I saw one.
You can
I
see
would
when
say, yeah.
you're closer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Come on. Sorry, my computer's lagging. I promise it's not me, it's the computer. Okay, so here's our proposal. So as I said, we're going to keep all the elements that they're original to the building. It's a fairly straightforward infill, sort of storefront infill proposal. We're proposing that we would use storefront material in combination with metal channels to fill out the storefront. We've got the main entry door. We have these are precast concrete sort of limestone look bulkheads that we're proposing. There is a second door that we're showing in our proposal. Again, Sal's not really sure. Right now, the upper floors are not being used at all. He imagines at some point he'll have funds and he'd like to restore the upper floors, in which case this would be the main entry for the apartments above. But because it's not currently connected, he's not sure when that's going to happen. We just put it kind of in there as a placeholder at this time. And essentially, that's really it. I don't know if I have anything else to explain about this. I'm happy to take any questions. Is there anything I forgot? Sarah says I'm good. So feel free to ask me questions.
Peter, Bob Russ. In plan, this is all up on the front line of the facade, right? There's no setback, or those doors both open in or out onto the sidewalk?
They're going to open in.
Yeah, okay. And the steel channels you're describing are sort of like an exposed sort of structural steel channel that frame the aluminum storefront? Is that what I'm getting?
Correct. It's a painted steel channel.
Right, gotcha. And relative dimensions of the doorways?
I don't remember. I think these wasn't it 3/6?
Yeah, that one's.
So we kind of designed this on a 3/6 module. So each of these transoms is 3/6. It kind of fills it out, and then we just carry those lines down.
At some point, there might be some signage or additional lighting, but that's not part of this application. Right?
Not part of this application, no.
So your restoration is from the sidewalk up to the top of the cornice?
Correct. To the signboard cornice. Yeah. So essentially to the sills of the second story.
Gotcha. Okay. So the original stuff, you'll just want to indicate for clarity going in.
Okay.
Scrape and paint.
Do you see my cursor, by the way? Are you able to see the little hand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
I've noticed that with the HRC, I don't know if it's recently, I may have thought about it recently. They've been asking for what the storefront looked like years and years ago? Because we know certainly it wasn't what's on there now. So I don't know if you had, if
We
you
were
did
not
any.
able to come up with any historic photos of this.
Okay.
But I guess leaning into Barbara's question, if you remove to expose the transom lights and found original transoms up there.
Those. Yeah,
Right.
we would keep those.
And yeah, and I guess if they
We'll
went
be
by
more-
it,
I'm glad you point that out. Actually, we'll be more clear on our final submittal that, bronze aluminum storefront, should the existing transom lights not be intact.
gotcha. No, appreciate that. And whatever that rhythm might be, might inform some other revision if it comes to that, or found to have something under their historic.
Sure. So it all,
I know you'd react to
yeah.
dealing with that. Yeah, no, anybody else certainly chime in. This is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
A lot of the rules and it has.
I mean, I budgeted 2 more hours for this. So if you guys, better rip.
Hey, I just do have a question, and this is sort of for Bob as well. You said he's not ready to do the pizza place, but is the pizza signage within the historic review or within the regulations, I guess?
There are separate neighborhood sign, East Carson Street neighborhood sign regulations. They're kind of part of the overall district regulations as well. So signage, yeah, it does get reviewed when it comes through. That's why I asked.
Okay, so it looks like the pizza sign has been there for a while.
You're asking about the next door property?
Yeah.
Let's go here. We'll go to the context.
Yeah, good question, Cleland.
So you're
I'm not aware this was a violation or a 311 currently, but it showed up at some point. I don't remember us ever reviewing it per se, but there's a lot of signage that is allowed to be approved over the counter without coming through the review process to the public. At least it had been in the past.
Or they just put it up. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
Bob,
this
there's a
side-
separate issue I want to talk to you about in terms of signage, but
Yeah.
that's another point.
I believe this sign's been there for at least a decade.
Right, I believe so too. But I guess to her point, I don't remember us reviewing it and approving it, but there's a lot of signage that Sarah and Sharon do over the counter. If they feel it's within the guideline rules, they'll just approve it over the counter and it doesn't come through the public review process or HRC
Okay.
at the hearing.
This is Jackie. I have a question. Can you go back to your proposed elevation? And these questions are because I don't know, and I want to try and understand and learn better about what's allowed. So in the storefront, you show an aluminum door. What's the rest of the storefront assembly? Aluminum or is it wood? And what is that? I know you said if you unearth a clear story, you would modify to address that. Is that clear story replaced with wood frame or aluminum? And then Bob, what's acceptable, I guess, in terms of historic review?
Well, I'll answer the question first, and then I'll let Bob answer the question. So we are not proposing any wood. The only wood that would remain are the original elements. So this transom bar right here that's rendered in sort of a salmon pink color, and then the green and red signboard and brackets. So those are all wood, and those would be restored as such. All the other elements are proposed to be, there's a little metal channel that's sort of a light green, and that kind of just sort of fills out the space between the aluminum storefront system and the original elements of the building.
Yeah, to answer to the guidelines. So the original storefront mostly has been lost, we suspect. Now, again, Peter's pretty diligent about when he opens up buildings, pointing out or coming back to us about things he may have found that are in good enough condition, original fabric, that the guidelines would want preserved. So the guidelines are clear. If you can find anything that's original and it can be restored, it should be preserved and saved and restored. When everything else is lost, this is a contributing building, meaning it's perfect example of what the East Carson Street District represents. Turn of the century architecture, first floor commercial, upper stories are probably residential at one point. So this kind of three-part storefront, we call it, with the upper transom, the larger middle kind of display windows, and then a base here rendered in precast concrete is very typical of the era. And therefore, Peter has the right to kind of put it back and follow kind of without being faux historic. And that's where his little contemporary steel channel thing comes in. He can kind of play and not to necessarily have to duplicate or recreate an old historic storefront. He is making some differences that show it is contemporary, but kind of follows the massing and the rules and the patterns that are established in the district at the first floor. So everything he's doing here is kind of right on the money. And then the question would be simply if, and the metal use versus wood is also sort of in the guidelines. It says, you know, during the era and changes in storefronts in the East Carson district, wood storefronts, particularly in the 30s, switched over to metal. And so they of themselves are sort of historic in their own way. And so when, you know, I was working with Jerry Morosco and we did the mall building storefronts that had been completely lost. We were allowed to use aluminum storefronts. So that's allowed. So, you know, he's doing everything here within the guidelines that I can see, and he's following patterns and he's being playful and changing door sizes and kind of getting asymmetries in here to say one door is different than the doorway going up to the second floor. There's a lot of good things happening here. So I don't see any issues. It's just a matter of what he finds that might be original and could be saved behind all that stuff that we would ask him to come back and talk to us about.
Okay. But if he were to like change the windows and they're wood now, he'd have to replace with wood.
If the original transoms are up there and they're in wood, yeah, you should save them and restore them. Now, there are caveats in the sense of, you know, what does it take to do that? If there's one stick of it left, there would be a debate as to, is there enough fabric left to really make that work? But, you know, again, you know, I trust that I don't think the LRC or Peter or even the HRC would have a difference of opinion if they wanted wood transoms and metal storefront. They don't necessarily have to match.
Okay.
This is where I'm going. If he has nothing there, he's proposing to do it all out of metal, aluminum and or steel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And understood. And then the color palette that you have here, is that reflective of what your final color palette will be?
So this is not necessarily our final color palette. We'll do a bit more in-depth exercise. We'll get, you know, color chips out on the site and we'll put up against the existing brick and so on and so forth. We typically don't like to go to that level of detail at this point in the process, only because it's very time consuming. And we really want to make sure that the broad strokes are accepted before we get into that level of detail. A lot of those elements, the color, you know, even, you know, small details are reviewed by the staff preservation planner at the city. She has the authority to accept or deny those things. So we kind of leave it to her to give us her judgment call on those details.
Does anyone else on the phone have any comments or questions to the presentation for 1320 East Carson?
And you know what, I don't have a question about 1320, but I'd like people to stay on the line because I wanted to mention something about 1701 East Carson. That's that Camboticon kitchen. They went up before Judge Riccardi last Thursday. So I just wanted to provide some information because it has to do with the historic district guidelines. But I just didn't want people to get off before if there were no more questions.
Okay. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions or comments on 1320.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words, Bob. You made me blush. I hope that didn't show up soon. But
it's because I'm drunk, Peter.
Peter, your work is always so very, very, I don't think nice is the right word, but it just is. When we saw what you did, the plan is for excuses, what you've done with Fatheads. So it's always good to hear that you're working on the storefronts on East Carson Street. And we always know that we get good quality work.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. Appreciate it.
So the next steps for 1320 are on the screen. I think a lot of people on this call are familiar with them, but if you have any questions or comments, let us know. Bob, did you want to say something else?
I was just going to say, he knows the LRC buddies of his won't let him get away with stuff. So
that's right. Yeah. Under more scrutiny than most. So.
But true statements, I second that. He does very clean, nice work, and Sarah's good. She brings all the best to him even more.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Is there any more slides in this deck for us to read or go over? Here we go. So if anyone needs any more information about the Southside Flats development projects, you can visit the Southside Community Council website for follow-up on the projects discussed during the dam. We do have a nice new website at www.southsidecommunitycouncil.org. You can view past dams at our YouTube page, and we encourage people to sign up for our monthly newsletter by going to the Southside Community Council website. Our next dam is scheduled for July 21st. Currently, I don't think we've had any one asked to be on the agenda, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks and go from there. So Tom and Phil, I don't know if you mind us hanging on this Zoom chat to go over Barb's issues about or comments about Cambodian kitchen. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You might stop recording.
Yeah, you can stop recording.
Sure. 1 second.
Thanks.